Brian Pontarelli, founder and CEO of FusionAuth. Welcome to the Inside Jam.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. This should be awesome.
Well, you are in the middle of all kinds of interesting things: authentication, threat detection, breached passwords, and obviously it is a more complex time than ever before. And by all accounts, it's going to get more complex still. So, tell us a little bit about what you're up to at FusionAuth and what you're thinking about, and how you're handling all that's around you.
Sure. Yeah. So just kind of a quick overview. FusionAuth is a customer identity and access management tool. And so what that means is that if you're building an application and you have end users or customers, or, just think like anything that's, might be on your phone, right? Any app that you have on your phone, and you need to provide login. We do that, right? So we provide application developers with an easy way to add login. That's as opposed to like managing the security and identity and single sign-on for employees. So those are kind of the two, the way that we break down the industries. And so when we think about customer identity, you figure there's sort of this like these competing ideals. And one of them is like, how do we get customers registered for our app and playing our game or using our service or whatever it might be with the least amount of friction and as fast as humanly possible? And then how do we make it so when they log in, it's secure, right? And so like the whole security versus friction is one of the hardest challenges that we face. And so at FusionAuth, we really look at the industry that way, right? We look at how do we get people into an application with, a very seamless, frictionless user experience, and then how do we get them logged back in later with the same, frictionless experience, but behind the scenes, everything is super secure. We just try to hide that from everyone and make their lives easy. And so that's been, what we've been doing, I would say, for the last 6 years and, 7 years since we launched, is we've been focusing on that approach and trying to solve that problem.
Well, so it seems to me that there's always going to be competing interests there, particularly with regard to people trying to build adoption quickly, where it is lower friction, and to a certain degree, I would argue that at the board level, even for some of these companies, it's like, lowering friction is maybe more important than maintaining clamp down security. I mean, what do you see, and how do you navigate that fine line in order to get everybody happy and secure?
I think you're spot on. Like, I think a lot of boards are like, hey, we'll figure out security later. Just go, or they're reactive. They're like, oh crap, something happened. Now we have to react to it. And now we have to start implementing security. And so what we do is we offload all that security, at least from the login and registration perspective. So you, as one of our customers, you hand that off to us. And you basically say, okay, we're going to trust you guys to do all the security, so that way we don't have to. And we've done it ahead of time, right? So because we sit down and we look at all these threat vectors, and we work with hackers, and we work with, bug bounty programs, and we do pen tests, and we do all of these exercises that most companies don't do. And so when they hand off their security to us, we basically say, yeah, we got you. Like, we've already done all of those things, and we have, hundreds and thousands of customers that are using our solution. And so we see a lot more than you will ever see. And so we handle all that for you. And the other point there is that FusionAuth is actually really unique in the industry. We are one of the only single-tenant models of any authentication provider out there. And what that means is that every single one of our customers has their own database. They have their own compute. They have their own security. And so if it so happened that one of our customers happened to get hacked for whatever reason, that doesn't bleed over to any other customer, because they're completely isolated from every single other customer. They're each their own tenant within, our cloud. And you can also download and run FusionAuth on your own servers. and on your own laptops. And so that model is fundamentally different and is the most secure model and we think the best way of doing authentication.
So how did it evolve? So you launched, and now you have a platform, and there's a lot of different elements and features. Did you launch the platform straight away, or did you start with particular features and then you've slowly built out and launched all the others?
Yeah, it's a good story. We actually started off with a completely different name and a completely different approach. So we started off with calling the tool Passport, which is a highly unfortunate name because it's impossible to search and it's impossible to find, and it doesn't really mean anything. And we were actually trying to address that big, that large scale, complex employee policy model.
Yep.
Well, once we realized that we had no business doing that and the name was horrible, we flipped it and we basically changed the name and started giving away the tool for free and went directly after developers. And so we provided download links and easy installation processes and very simple integration. And so that change really launched us. And that was in the end of 2018. And within a couple of months, we went from essentially nobody hearing about us to thousands of downloads a month.
And so how did you come to that decision? And how did you feel as you were making that decision? I mean, that's kind of what is that, a bet the company type thing? I mean, how did you decide that?
We sat in a room. We hired a consultant, and he came in and told us to stop working on it completely and go build something new. He's like, you're never going to compete with Okta and Microsoft and the rest of them. So just give up now and build something different. And so there were I don't know, 4 or 5 of us at the time. We sat in a room and we're like, do we think that that's true? And everybody was like, no. I think we really have something here that's truly different, but we just need to figure out how to get it out, how to get people interested and excited about it. And we were all developers. We love working with developers, and we sort of take pride in the developer tools that we use. And we're like, hey, what if we made this a developer tool and just made it great for ourselves? I think other developers would use it too, right? And so it was kind of dumb luck a little bit, but because we knew what we wanted so emphatically, we're just like, let's build that. And let's go to town. And we did. And I mean, again, it just took off. It was awesome to see.
So where are you finding your traction these days? Is it in the kind of genesis stage of, we'll build this right into our new, developers are building it right into their new apps and so forth? Or are you seeing people coming to you with their their hair on fire and the board is yelling at them and saying, you got to tighten this up?
So we kind of call it our 3-legged stool, right? So we have a ton of people that are greenfield, and that might be a brand new startup, but it also might be a Fortune, 50 company that's building a new app or revamping an old app. And then we see a lot of switches. So we see a lot of folks that are switching from a homegrown solution to something a little bit more comprehensive, we'll say, a little more secure. So we see that a lot too. So these are legacy apps or just very, widely adopted applications. And the companies have just finally made the decision to hand this off to a third party. And then we see switches. So they're using one of our competitors. They're unhappy with them for whatever reason. And they're like, we found FusionAuth and we love it. And then they jump over. So it's about equal. It's about 30-30-30 or, third.
Well, it feels to me, again, I don't know the business obviously as well as you do, but it feels to me like this may oftentimes not be a priority decision as they're dealing with the architecture and the other development challenges of building a new app. Do you find as a developer that this is what developers think about, or do they want to not think about it?
They definitely want to not think about it, right? It's plumbing. It's that's not the fun stuff to work on. You're building an app that, lets you find the latest and greatest recipe or, view the recipe without the person's life story. Like I would love to have that app, right? So like everybody's building an app to solve some problem, and login is the last thing they want to worry about. So you're totally right. Like it's not an immediate need, and it's not a pressing concern a lot of times. But once it does bubble up in the roadmap, we want them to know that FusionAuth is the go-to solution. And so in order to do that, we have to build a relationship with those developers over a very long period of time. Now, there are going to be a ton of developers that are ready for it right now. And we want them to find us very quickly. But they're the larger businesses that they know that's on their roadmap in 2027, right? And so they put that on their roadmap, and we'll get there eventually, but we just need to make sure that they remember us when that project comes up.
So what's been working for you in terms of what you said when you decided to change your model, you went to the developer community, in practical terms, just for anybody who's thinking similarly, what was it that you did?
That's a great question. So the first thing we did is we made it simple to install, right? Like that was paramount. If a developer can't figure out how to just start using the software, they're out. So we put it in, Docker, for example. Like most developers at this point use Docker, and so you can just say Docker pull FusionAuth and Docker run, and within 30 seconds you're up and running. We made these things called fast path installs. And it's just like one command line and you're up and running. We started adding all these other developer features, right? Because FusionAuth can be downloaded, we're one of the only ones that developers can actually run real tests against. And so they download it locally, get FusionAuth configured, and then run tests against it, and then tear FusionAuth down. Well, we actually built a tool that allows them to automate that entire process. So they can pull it down. We call it Kickstart. They kickstart it, they run a bunch of tests, and then they delete it. And they can do that infinite times. They can just do that over and over and over. And so that Kickstart gets FusionAuth to a perfect state so they can run their tests against it. And so in order to solve the developer problem, we had to think like developers and figure out the problems that they were facing when it comes to login, build tools that allow them to solve those problems, and then figure out how to tell them that they exist, right? So, blogs and podcasts
Right.
and newsletters and Hacker News, and we just blanket our message everywhere.
Yeah, no, I've seen your you've got some battle cards on your LinkedIn profile. I know you're aggressive out there. It's good. I admire it. But what is it like? What is the landscape like out there? I mean, I want people who are watching this who are keen to listen to what founders have to go through. What is it like to get into the mix there like that and really compete? Because obviously there's a lot of competing stories. There's a lot of competing products. What do you find that is most effective for you in terms of positioning and presenting key differentiators?
So we started with no money, right? So FusionAuth is completely bootstrapped almost the entire way through. And even, the transaction we did back in 2023 wasn't like a large VC raise. And so we jumped into a market where we had Auth0, raised a few $100 million, and then got bought by Okta. And then you have all these other players that raised, 60, 90, $100 million or more. And they're just dumping money into this industry. And so it's actually like extremely hard to compete with those people because they can just throw marketing dollars at anything that they want. So we had to be hyper focused, and every penny we spent had to matter. And so what we did is we basically mapped out every place that as developers ourselves and our friends, how do we learn about new software and how do we learn about new tools, right? Because the new tools come out all the time. And so there is a way where people learn about these things, and we wrote them down. And then we stack ranked them. We said, which ones are free? And then which ones cost money and how much do they cost? And then we went down the line until we got to the ones that were too expensive for us to afford. And we literally did every single one. Post on LinkedIn, free. Send some emails, free. Get into Slack channels, free. So there's all these avenues that are free, and we just sat in a room for the better part of a year just knocked them down. And then we went to the paid ones and we said, well, AdWords is expensive. We're not doing that. That's crazy money. Let's do like Reddit ads. They're cheap. Let's do newsletters. We can sponsor newsletters. Those are cheap. So we ended up figuring out ways to get our message out there for pretty low costs. And we did that for years. And we just kept rinsing and repeating and doing the same thing over and over and over. Then we started building more content, and we built a whole content library and focused on SEO. And again, that's free. It's just time, right? But we're not spending dollars. We're just spending time doing these things. Now we're to a stage where we can actually dump money into marketing and, experiment and try things. But again,
and are you finding that to be effective? And I mean, coming out of that kind of old school, grind and put it all together and make it work, MacGyver approach, or are you, now that you have the kind of air support and real firepower?
Some of it works and some of it doesn't, right? So like AdWords actually tend to work. Like even developers will click on them, and so we spend quite a bit of money on AdWords. It's just because it drives traffic and that actually converts to like real, MQLs. LinkedIn, super expensive, doesn't really work that well. So we spent a bunch of money there and didn't really find that it worked. And we, now we're trying to tune it. And so we spend less money, but it's hyper targeted. So that's a little bit more effective, but still it doesn't net out much. We went from going to like 3 events a year or 2 events a year. And I think this year we're going to try going to 20. So that's a big jump and a lot more money. Will it net out? Don't know, but it's worth a shot, and we'll see if it works. And if it works, great. Do that, let's ramp it up. If it doesn't, maybe there are some shows that do work and others that don't, so we can get more focused. But those are the experiments we're running now that we have more money. But it's tricky. And for me as a bootstrapper, it's super unnerving to see all this money. You're just like, oh my God, I would never spend that money. Oh, wow. Okay, go.
And so is it similarly on the sales front? Is there a sales effort that needs to take place as well once you've got that kind of initial install or test or pilot or trial? Do you guys have the sales team now that kind of goes and closes the deals?
Absolutely. Yeah. Started off with 1 salesman, this guy right here.
Yeah.
And now I think we're 10 total, with 5 sales engineers. So we're 2-to-1 ratio. We have, different territories. We have different sales leaders at the top of the territory. So we have a whole structure, right? Because when you start getting those leads coming in every day, multiple leads, you gotta, have to have folks to jump on them. And then, they take anywhere from 30 days to, 30 months to close. And so you're like, okay, you gotta work and lots of touch points. So no way one person could do it. Yeah. We have a whole sales team built out for that.
Well, let's talk about where we're headed a little bit, because things are getting more and more complex. And it's probably a good thing for you that they're getting more and more complex. But I'm curious about authentication and the challenges that systems will face, given everything that I'm seeing now with regard to, I just spent the morning on Sora actually, and I couldn't believe the amount of imagery that is, and you can just see the things that people are producing and the detail and clarity. And it feels to me like it's going to be incredibly hard for some of the, facial recognition that we're employing these days to be able to keep up with what's coming there. I mean, how are you seeing authentication evolving? I mean, voice, any of these kind of 2-factor forms that may have worked in the past and may have felt impervious, but with the modern development of AI, I don't know. What are you seeing? Not to mention all the other, obviously, all the other threats that are now optimized. But what do you see as happening in your industry with regard to the kind of AI moment?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of aspects to it. One of which is like the platforms themselves, right? So like Apple, Microsoft, they're working a lot on technologies to secure identities and really to secure the systems and the devices. right? And we get to leverage that because now there's open standards that employ Touch ID and Face ID and all these things. And those technologies are continuing to improve, right? So like the ability to hack Touch ID from 10 years ago is fundamentally different than the ability to hack, a face or a Touch ID now, with all the data points and, IR cameras and scanning surfaces, and spoofing those things is becoming more and more difficult. But they're constantly keeping up, or having to keep up with AI generated things, and even the ability to like 3D print out faces. And it's like, can I print out someone's face and then use that as a Face ID? That's a concern, right? That's a real thing. So we have to, rely on these platforms wholeheartedly. Like you have to like completely say, yep, I'm going to buy into the fact that Apple is doing their best to make their piece of the technology as secure as possible. And then I get to leverage that through open standards like FIDO and WebAuthn and other technologies, and GNIP and all the new technologies that are coming out, or GNAP. Yeah. So there's a ton of that going on. And then in our space, we also see the AI in different aspects as well, where it's like we're seeing people leverage AI to write their applications, right? Because we're a dev tool, and so people are saying like, having a prompt like, "Hey, Copilot, write me an integration with an OAuth provider," or like, "Write me an integration with FusionAuth." And so we have to optimize our tactics of providing information so that they are AI friendly. And no one really knows how the AI is figuring this stuff out or how to optimize for AI. So it's like a kind of a guessing game.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So as a developer, you certainly, I'm sure, have noticed that code can be created incredibly competently and remarkably quickly through artificial intelligence and the chat GPT models that are out there. And it's been our sense here at Solutions Review that is going to have a significant impact on developers, particularly junior developers. It's almost like the rungs of the ladder that everybody used to climb up and become eventually a CEO. I mean, almost all the CEOs I talked to on this podcast started out as a developer, as a junior coder, just grinding code and learning fundamental atomic, movements of computer science, and that feels like it's potentially going to go away in short order through artificial intelligence and large language models and all the code that can be created now, and certainly with agents and so forth. So, where do you see it going, and what do you believe is the impact on the community, the coder community?
So my son is actually up at CU studying computer engineering, computer science, exact same degree I got. And we talk about this a lot, right? Because he's trying to figure out like, how do I get a job? And it looks like doomsday out there for these folks that are graduating from engineering, or CS or whatever, trying to find a job if that AI is just doing the code that they would have normally done. And so I told him, I was like, take some AI courses, right? Like learn how these things work and learn how to build the next generation of them, and then you're going to have a job. But the other aspect of it is learn what's good code and bad code, right? Because AI can generate a for loop just like the rest of us. But is it going to generate the for loop that can run on the hard, like some embedded piece of hardware that needs to do 40 gigabit per second network transfers? No, of course not. Like a human is going to be required to figure that out and optimize that piece of code that the AI generated. So there's still going to be human components of this to optimize. And you can't optimize unless you know what's good and bad, right? You have to know your fundamentals in terms of data structures and, pointers and memory management and all these things. Like you have to know all this in order to be the person that generates the best prompts and then spit out the code and then make sure the code is actually the best code that it could be, right? So we're going to need engineers, in my opinion, for a very long time, but they're just the next level of engineers. They're the engineers that know the tooling and know the AI and know how to optimize for things. That's my personal view of, how the engineers are going to stay relevant.
Well, let's keep going down that perspective, having a son in college. Because do you believe that the university system is capable of staying in tune with this rapidly evolving technology? Because I don't.
Yeah.
I think they are the least equipped to recognize what's coming. And quite frankly, I think they're in the crosshairs as much as anybody.
I think it's kind of the same stack ranking that we used to use for colleges, like, US News and World Report, right? So if you look at MIT and you look at the way that they're approaching AI and that they're, thinking about it, it's going to be quite different than if you look at, Metropolitan State College of Denver, right? So there's going to be grades of the way that their faculty understand and have helped create the algorithms that AI is using, right? So CU happens to be one of those schools that has a very strong AI, NLP, and ML program. And they have, PhD programs that people have done, pretty amazing things at. And they're also a research school. So I think it's going to come down to school by school basis, very similar to the way it used to be, right? So like you would go to certain schools just for networking if you were interested in networking. You would go to school at, CU and get a PhD if you were interested in like natural language processing. So that's kind of I think there are some schools that are going to fall way behind and some schools that are going to keep up, unfortunately. But yeah.
Well, zoom out even further, and out of the computer science department and into just colleges and universities in general. I mean, it feels to me like their unique selling proposition has always been, well, we have knowledge that you don't have.
Yeah.
And we have professors who can deliver that to you that you can't access unless you pay us for that. And so you sit in a room and we download to a whole sea of you. And that feels to me like that is indefensible in where we're headed. Completely indefensible.
Good teachers are going to continue to allow students to learn faster than they can learn on their own, right? So, just think of the best teacher you had, in college, high school, whatever it was, right? They inspired you. They actually made you want to learn and create things and do all those things, even maybe in a subject that you absolutely hated or just had no interest in it. That's where teachers really shine, right? We've all had bad teachers and they've all just, oh my God, I remember this, story of my chemistry teacher, and I couldn't learn a thing from it. I had to go teach myself.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who started a lot of companies because of that teacher.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And so we've had online learning and the ability, like Khan Academy, we've had so much information out there in the world in well digestible formats, right? Like things like videos and like people walking you through step by step. And some people learn really well because they're hyper motivated to go learn that on their own. And then there's the flip side of that where there are people who just aren't, and they need that shepherd. They need that help, that teacher at those universities to present it to them. So
do they though? This is where so I'm going to push you on that one. Do they need that now? I mean, do they need or is that antiquated as well, that you can recreate that person in perfect form in short order through avatars and perfectly tuned? I mean, won't we all just have our perfect teacher eventually in a virtual space?
Potentially. Yeah, if we can tune it to your learning style and provide them the content in a manner that you digest the best, 100%. But how far are we from that, right? And
yeah, right.
and
that's why you're here.
But there's still the human interaction of going to a place of learning and being inspired by the learning of it, as well as the tactile things that you get to do, where you get to take a 8086 CPU and put it on a breadboard. Like there's still pieces of this that are in person. I think that the shift to online learning was actually a detriment to most learning. I think going in person and having somebody sit next to you and write things or show you how to put resistors into a breadboard, like those things are still going to exist. So I'm much less of a doomsdayer, AIer than I think a lot of people. I look at AI as a tool, not as a panacea. It doesn't solve problems. It's a tool to help us solve problems, but without people to use the tool and to know how to use the tool effectively, it's the same state that we're currently in. There's information's everywhere, right? It's just we're using a tool to help us accelerate our learning or to accelerate our code generation or doing a task.
Well, so this is another hot topic around these parts that I often have conversations with people about, which is, it feels to me anyway, like a lot of people are stuck. A lot of corporate decision makers are stuck as to what to do. That it's all happening so fast. You're being pressured by the board. You got to come up with an AI strategy. They have been spending years optimizing their systems and employing rudimentary machine learning and other things like that. But I mean, they're not idiots. Their systems are pretty tight, and yet still they're being told AI. I need an AI strategy. And I think they're looking at all the models that keep coming out, and there's one leap after another, and none ever stay there are no true leaders to speak of. It feels like it depends on the week you look. So I believe people are literally paralyzed right now. There are major decision makers who don't know what to do, and the tools from all the money that has been invested, and it's hundreds of billions of dollars of money that's been invested in these startup companies that are supposed to be bringing all these tools to the party, and they haven't arrived yet in my mind. I don't see a killer app yet. I think ChatGPT and just generative AI is like it's like the browser it's like Netscape when it first arrived. It's like, cool. Now what?
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody is stuck waiting for the next thing to show up, or the salespeople from all these startups that are going to say, we built it and here it is. And look how cool it is. And now they understand. But I don't know. What do you think? What are you seeing with some of your clients? What are you seeing with colleagues? What are you seeing in industries adjacent? How are people thinking about it? And what should they be doing?
So I get this question a ton, right? So it's like, even with us, it's like, what's your AI strategy? And our AI strategy is like, we sell login and you don't want any AI anywhere near that, right? It's like, please don't let AI figure out if you are you. Let's prove you are actually you via your fingerprint, your password, whatever it might be. So there are industries that are getting overrun with AI, but we still have fundamental core needs, both in technology and just as humans, that are not AI-able, right? So like, you can't remove the need to go to McDonald's and get a hamburger, or wherever you go to Qdoba and get a burrito. Like, I can't AI that, right? Maybe eventually somebody like a robot builds it for you, but it's still like, we have to raise the chicken and harvest the rice, and those are still core human needs. Just the same with login. Login is still a core human need in order to use the applications that you need to use or you want to use, and it's not AI. It's not AI driven. Now, there could be AI literate about it, but the core technology component of it is you don't want AI anywhere near that. Anyone that says they're putting AI into their login, run away screaming, holy moly. And so I look at the industries that AI does really well in and fundamentally changes that industry versus the industries that aren't AI-able, right? And I think there's a ton of them. A friend of mine just introduced me to a new terminal, right? So old school, just logging in and running your shell scripts and stuff. And it's called Ghosty. There's no AI in that. It's just a terminal. And it's just a very lightweight, simple terminal. It does everything you need. And that's still a need, right? And so I think there are businesses that are still coming out and doing things that just there's AI doesn't exist in. And so when people are like, oh my God, the world's going to fundamentally change and everything's changing and no computer engineer is ever going to get a job. And there's these doomsdayers. And I'm like, No.
Well, but there is, I would say that a large part of the pressure from boards on, and again, zoom out a little bit to just large organizations, very large organizations. The pressure is got to be driven to find ways to reduce headcount. Capitalism is undefeated. That they're going to want people to employ AI to increase profit.
Sure.
And that will have a bit of a doomsday effect on many easily. I mean, I think we all know, and I think we've all seen in organizations, places where we have a lot of people, but we don't necessarily have to always have a lot of people if we can figure out how to create agents that can do exactly that.
Totally agree. There are a lot of jobs that are automatable, right? And so the people that are doing those jobs, do they learn how to manage the automation, or do they become irrelevant? Or do they get trained?
Or are they the trainers of the automated robot?
Exactly. There's always going to be people who start off doing something that can be automated. Same thing with industrialization. And they move up to the ones that are running the machines and managing the things that are doing it, versus the ones who lose their jobs and need to figure out what to do next because they don't have the skills to do that, right? And so I think it still comes down to a skill issue, right? Because it's like, as AI gets smarter and smarter, there's still people who need to train the AI, manage it, make sure it's doing the right thing, doesn't get off the rails. Same thing with the people that were running the machines that were, producing the car parts or whatever. And that they're the machines get smarter, but there's still people that fix them when they break. And so I see it the same way. Like, again, I always think that people can learn new skills and can be retrained and can level themselves up. And, it's kind of like the linchpin model, like make yourself a linchpin and then you'll never be fired. Even if something gets automated away from you, still needs to be managed. So become the manager.
What happens though when people, there is no leveling up. So I was on Sora all morning this morning because I couldn't not. I was blown away by what it is doing. It's unbelievable what it's doing, but it's clearly going to be, it replaces a graphic designer straight away. You do not need to hire a graphic designer if you play with it long enough and have a very specific output that you want to generate. You can do that yourself, and it will it will violate every copyright, every intellectual property protection. It has no feelings. It doesn't care. It's going to just power through your prompt and deliver whatever you want. It's shocking, and it's training away. It's training away on all these. It's basically saying, give us anything you want to give us, and we'll just learn. But there's no defense for that. How do you tell somebody who's 35 years old, who's been a graphic designer for 10 years, gainfully employed?
Yeah.
And how do they compete? Like I feel an existential crisis is coming of people having a hard time truly understanding their value in society when they finally realize, I can't do that. I can't compete.
So there's two aspects to it, right? AI is derivative. So it's going to derive from all the things it learns. It can't create. That's just the fundamental core basis of AI. Right? It's always derivative. So it's just a huge polynomial of math, and it's filling in variables to figure out what's the similar thing that I've derived from all the information I've seen. Okay. So people still need to program in the prompts, right? Like, you still have to ask it things and tune it and tweak it. And then if you don't like exactly what it's going to do, you can still modify it just by getting, the Illustrator file or the Photoshop file and tweaking it. So that's still going to be a thing. So these designers need to, again, just kind of shift their theory and their thinking to be like, hey, go generate this thing that's a good start, and I'm going to tweak it. So I still think that that's going to be a thing. Changing colors, changing backgrounds, cutting a background out, whatever. There's still things that need to be modified. Then there's the brand new things that the AI gets trained on and learns from that don't exist yet. And so, like, a great example, so later today, go to searchcraft.io, right? It's a startup in Denver. They're amazing. They're going to revolutionize search. But basically, I'm advising them. But one of the things that they've done is they've built a website and a brand that is unlike anything I've ever seen before. And what they have done is they've used some AI to generate some components of it, but stitching it all together and getting the right prompts and building their website was a huge exercise, right? AI certainly helped it. So they didn't have to go full-blown designer, but they were certainly taking things that AI generated and tweaking them and then like getting them in the right place. And they have the, this really cool 8-bit kind of, sort of, it's a search craft. So it's like a space shuttle kind of theme. And that's like, I've never seen anything like that before. And so they leveraged AI, but it didn't build the whole thing from scratch, which is amazing, right? So like there's still going to be things that AI just can't create. Like I asked AI, fairly recently, I'm like, write me an identity provider in, Node. And it wrote me like the most naive login thing that you could possibly imagine. So it can generate full things. It can help you generate smaller things right now. Maybe at some point it'll get there, but I still wouldn't trust it. It's definitely not going to be secure. So somebody's going to have to review all of it and make sure it's secure. So anyway, it's that kind of approach, right? I think that it's a really great tool right now. And maybe at some point in the future, it gets smart enough where it just does all the work. But right now it's not. It's a tool, right? And it generates things and then we tweak them and we stitch them together and we review them and make sure that they're good. And then we rubber stamp it and ship it to production.
And I guess we'll find out how it's all going to play out. It's certainly, for you and I anyway, it's not going to have the same impact as our kids. And my kids are slightly older than yours, but roughly their whole career ahead of them. So let's talk about your career and the path you took to get to where you are today, which is, CEO of a thriving enterprise or a thriving technology company. I don't know if we'd call it enterprise tech, but maybe. Do you remember decisions along the way that you consciously made, kind of a fork in the road, where you said, I think I'm going to go do this, not knowing necessarily where that path would lead, but very much thinking, yeah, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I went to CU, studied computer science, computer engineering, and
why did you do that in the first place? I mean, what was the reason for that?
My parents bought us an 8086, right? So my dad was a dentist, my mom was a nurse. And they're like, hey, these computer things are gonna be really cool. We probably should get one that, could be the wave of the future. And so they bought like one of the very first like actual IBM 8086s. Brought it home and we set it up and my brother and I just devoured it. I mean, like we were just all in. And so we were tweaking and installing and like, programming and like I learned Pascal and assembler and C. And this was back in like the 80s, right? So I was so intrigued by the computer from the get-go. Like from the first time I pushed the on button to now, they're amazing machines. And once I learned that you could program them and they can actually do things, I mean, that was it. That was like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It came so naturally to me that when I first started at CU, I was like, oh man, I've been programming and doing this so long. Maybe I'll try something new, right? And so I actually went into electrical engineering. And the second I was like putting circuits together and building breadboards, I'm like, man, this is horrible. Like, this is so much work. I just want to sit down and code and like, compile it and make it, make the computer do things. And I can't. And so I switched back from electrical engineering to computer engineering because it just made sense to me.
Well, there's a fork in the road that we're actually just reversed right back out and went back on the path. Yeah, which is a good lesson in and of itself, right? You're not stuck just because you make a decision you're not happy with. Doesn't mean you have to keep this idea. You got to keep grinding, no matter what. Grind.
I'm a big advocate for not doing that, right? I mean, I've changed courses and tweaked things, and I love change. I think change is, once you embrace it, it's very exciting, and it can actually be the thing that motivates you to do to keep going or to try something new or do whatever. And so I embrace change. Like I'll reorganize my desk, once a year or so, or I'll reorganize, my desktop or whatever. Like doing it helps you brain like think about things in a new way, right? And like getting things reorganize in your head is super important for creating things. Like you have to have that creativity and you have to constantly be reinventing things, I think, in order to be, to start your own company and go build something. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate for change. And that was my first one, which was like, hey, this programming thing's really easy. And by the end of college, I was like teaching some of the courses, right? And so like, I was like, it just came so naturally. I'm like, why am I fighting this? This is stupid. Like, let's just do this thing because it's amazing.
Well, so you clearly learned some other things along the way, because not all developers that I've met have quite the same outgoing personality, and clearly you have some sales capability in there somewhere. Did you naturally have that, or did you feel like you needed to lean in, or would you provide advice to somebody who may not have the full suite of skills that they should potentially lean in? I remember years ago, I was in politics at an early age, and I was pretty successful as a political consultant at an early age. But I remember being so kind of off-put by how young I was compared to everybody else that I left, and I was shy, terribly shy. I left and I said, I need to get over this shyness, and I became a bartender. Just because it would force me. I literally remember the decision of just saying, I'm just going to force myself to get people coming at me relentlessly who I don't know, and I'll just deal with it. So, but I'm curious, like, how did you get to be such a good salesperson and marketer?
I mean, I had to learn some of it, right? I mean, it doesn't, come naturally to me. So when I first decided that I was going to start doing the sales, and, Daniel was one of the co-founders of FusionAuth. And so he kept doing the tech, and I was like, I'll go do sales and marketing. Like, I'll go do this stuff. I just had to figure it out. Right. And so the nice thing is that if you don't think about sales as like being salesy or like selling things, like learning to sell or anything like that, you just literally sit down in front of people and just talk about like why you love what you're doing. It's pretty easy to sell them things, right? And I created it. So for me, it was just literally telling them like, oh my God, this is amazing. Check this out. This, like, we did this thing. You should totally try it. And it's free. Just go use it. Right. And people are like, it was kind of like disarming. There's like, wait, what? Like, oh my God, that is amazing. Yes, I'm going to totally go use that today. So it was something that once I figured out to like not try and be a salesperson, but just to talk to people and just have a conversation, it came naturally because I've always been able to sort of sit down with people and just chat, right? I'm an extrovert, right? I love, talking to people. If I'm alone too long, it starts to weird me out. I'm like, I gotta go talk to people, So I just embodied the things that I had already done. Same thing with marketing. It's like, it's just a conversation, just doing it in a way that you're not face to face. You're just, I'm putting up an ad, but it's still a conversation. I'm trying to give you information and make it fun. And I'm a huge advocate of humor and fun. Like, without that stuff, oh man, it's just, life's so boring. Might as well go work at IBM and wear a suit and a tie every day. Like, that's not my jam.
Well, so talk about culture and how you're thinking about building the business. So are you we did go through this moment where everybody was virtual, and it felt to me like we lost something there, that everybody lost the ability to kind of have these impromptu conversations. I don't think organizations were getting the same benefit from the human beings in their organization just showing up on a virtual basis. Yeah. How do you think about it? How do you think about how you hire, where you put them, the culture you're looking to build, what you look for in employees? I mean, what are you trying to do?
So culture is really important for us. We talk to people a lot about, this is not the easiest job you're ever going to have, but it's going to be one of the most rewarding, because we don't build things that people don't want. And we don't start working on projects that we don't have a very clear understanding of if it's going to be successful. And we, you can talk to 100 developers and hear, 100 different stories about things they worked on that never saw the light of day, or they got canned at the end, or like they downsized and they, or whatever. There's stories all over the place. And with us, we're like, you're going to come on, you're going to be an owner, and you're going to take ownership of this stuff. And when you build something, you're building something because people are asking for it. And within, hours of its shipping, people are going to be using it, right? Because again, we don't build software that people are going to use 5 years from now. We build software that people asked for and they were waiting for. And the second it's ready, they're going to start using it. So that runs through everything. And that, like, everybody in the organization has to embody that and embrace it, because if you don't, and you just sort of want to hide and, do work and not be seen and not take pride in ownership, you'll never survive. And so we every interview we have, we ask people specifically about that. And we talk to them about this ownership, and we talk to them about what we are doing and why we're building the software, right? To solve real problems. But then we make sure they're a real human and not a robot, and that they like to have fun and they do things outside work, right? So we ask almost everybody, we're like, what do you do outside work? I go biking, I go downhill skiing, I'm a cocktail junkie. That's me. They do other things and they have other interests. And that's important too, because we want people that can bring their unique experiences in and be, and help build an organization that's diverse and has different thoughts. And they don't just go home and binge Netflix all night, right? They're going home and doing things and exploring the world. That's another really important piece for us. So those are the things that we look for. And a sense of humor is always good. We tell jokes and we if we don't hear somebody laugh during an interview, it's probably not a good fit, And another really key for us, and this is something weird that I've just come to realize within the last year or two, is that when people use the word we, they're probably already in the mode of thinking about and getting excited about what we're doing. And so a lot of times during interviews, I actually look for that. I'm like,
if they use the we, yeah.
It's just a tiny little thing, but I had a lot of interviews where people are like, oh, it looks like you guys are doing this. And I'm like, yeah, we are. What do you think? And they're like, well, we should do this. And I'm like, okay, you obviously have thought about it enough and then pictured yourself being in the position and want to take ownership, right? So those little things matter. And they're good indicators, right? But hiring is super hard.
Yeah, no. If only we got it right 100% of the time. But
exactly.
So actually, one last question for me, and I'll preface it by telling you one of my answers to it. But I like to ask CEOs, what is the one thing you like about your job, and what is the one thing you don't like about your job? Not necessarily the biggest thing, but one thing. And I will tell you that one of the things that I don't like about my job is the disappointment I feel when somebody doesn't work out. It is one of the worst feelings in the world when you hire somebody with all this positive potential and expectation, and it, for whatever reason, it just doesn't work out. They just can't do the job, or the expectations didn't become realized, or whatever it is, and you've missed somehow. It's so disappointing. But anyway, that's my answer. But you can't use that one. but what are a couple of things? The thing you like maybe the most, but the thing one of the things you don't like.
So I think the thing I like the most is creating products, creating solutions, again, that people actually use. It's a pretty cool feeling when you create something, you put it out there, and you're putting yourself out there, and people are like, yeah, that's amazing. And you're like, really? Yeah, I want to use that. And you're like, awesome, I'll make more of that stuff, right? That's what gets me going. I mean, I think that's the thing that I love day in and day out. It's just watching people use the things that I create. And then I would say the thing that sort of I'm not good at and it drives me nuts is the stress of making sure people love the things I create, right? So because it's stressful, especially when the money comes into it, right? I mean, I can create something that's free and, if people don't want to use it, that's fine, because it's, whatever, it's just free. There's, use it or not. But once it's okay, now I have to support, 50, 60, 100 employees and make sure that they get, money to pay their rent. And so I have to make sure that people love the product so much that they're willing to pay money for it. Like, that's a level of stress that is really hard to deal with. And I think a lot of founders, and I'll take a little swipe at VC founders because they often have a somewhat different mindset, which is like, I have a ton of money to experiment. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay because I was getting paid the whole time. Everyone else is getting paid the whole time. Thank you, VC, for writing this really large ass check, right? You don't have that luxury when you're bootstrapping, and you have to you don't make bets. You make methodically thought out decisions that have an extreme, highly likely, chance of succeeding. And like, that's your job. The amount of stress that you kind of, put on yourself in those situations can sometimes be unbearable. And not to discount other CEOs. Like, every CEO has stress, and we all feel it.
No, but I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, being bootstrapped ourselves, when you don't have a lot of ramp to make a mistake. When you realize you're making a mistake, you don't get the luxury of just, maybe I can turn it around, or maybe we can just lean into it, or maybe we'll just hire more salespeople, and we'll just overpower it with marketing dollars. It's like, none of that is an option for a bootstrap company. Nope. you are reading the tea leaves. You are like checking the wind. You're trying to find any indication at all that this is going to work. And if it isn't going to work, you got to pull the ripcord so soon, or you're just going to burn the whole thing down. And that is stress,
pure stress. So that's the one thing that I'm not a fan of. Like, is stress.
Good answer. All right. Well, great. Well, Brian, thanks very much for the time today. Appreciate it. Great conversation. And best of luck, obviously, with everything that you're working for.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. And yeah, it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. It was great.
Powered by Insight Jam.